Okay, so since we didn't finish in class and people were absent anyway, we're going to go ahead and make an audio recording for Tale of Two Cities, Book the First, Chapter 5, The Wine Shop, which is an awesome chapter and really starts foreshadowing the revolution, as if he hadn't already been already. So the wine shop is in Paris. It is owned by Madame and Monsieur Defarge, who are awesome and who are the ones hiding Dr. Manet. You remember from an earlier chapter it said he's with an old servant. Well, Defarge is Dr. Manet's old servant, which in about 2.5 seconds you're going to figure out anyway, so I'm not really spoiling anything by telling you now. Madame Defarge is amazing. She is my number 2 reason for absolutely loving this book. You have not met the character who is my number 1 reason, but you will, and I'm totally going to fangirl. But right now, just introducing your villain for all purposes. Okay, so here we go. A large cask of wine had been dropped and broken in the street. The accident had happened in getting it out of a cart. The cask had tumbled out with a run. The hoops had burst, and it lay on the stones just outside the door of the wine shop, shattered like a walnut shell. All the people within reach had suspended their business, or their idleness, to run to the spot and drink the wine. The rough, irregular stones of the street, pointing every way, and designed, one might have thought, expressly to lame all living creatures that approached them, had dammed it into the little pools. These were surrounded, each by its own jostling group or crowd, according to its size. Some men kneeled down, made scoops of their 2 hands joined, and sipped, or tried to help women, who bent over their shoulders to sip, before the wine had all run out between their fingers. Others, men and women, dipped in the puddles with little mugs of mutilated earthenware, or even with handkerchiefs from women's heads, which were squeezed dry into infants' mouths. Others made small mud embankments to stem the wine as it ran. Others, directed by lookers-on up at high windows, darted here and there to cut off little streams of wine that started away in new directions. Others devoted themselves to the sodden and lead-dyed pieces of the cask, licking and even champing the moister, wine-rotted fragments with eager relish. There was no drainage to carry off the wine, and not only did it all get taken up, but so much mud got taken up along with it that there might have been a scavenger in the street, if anybody acquainted with it could have believed in such a miraculous presence. So you kind of get the start. There was a cask, you know, those giant barrels. Okay, not like a little bottle, that makes no sense, but one of those huge barrels of wine. And the people carrying it dropped it, and it split open like a walnut shell. This is a nice little simile. And when it splits open, all the people standing around, whether they had been working or whether they were just sitting by, idled, kind of doing nothing, run to it. And they're scooping it into little puddles, and they're kind of diverting it, and there are people up in the windows directing them like, hey, go that way, there's some more, and they're kind of running, and it's sort of this, on the surface, kind of this fun camaraderie going on. Okay, but this is a Dickens book, so you can't take anything really at surface value. There's always something more. The characters have something more, even what's going on, there's a little bit more to it. So it seems all fun, ha ha ha, but when you look at what's really happening, I mean, they're chasing down wine in the street. They're making it form puddles with the mud, and then they're scooping it out with their hands with rags off of their head. So their dirty clothes, they're sopping up as much as they can and ingesting it. Mud, dirt, filth from the street, everything. They are ingesting it. Because there's nothing else. These people are hungry. They're starving. They're squeezing those rags dry till there's not another drip just to give their baby something in their belly. This is a terribly, terribly depressing scene when you really look at it. The part about the scavenger at the end, that's a street sweeper. So they ingest so much of the filth off of the road that it looks like a street sweeper had gone through. As if anyone could believe a street sweeper went through there. It's the little sarcastic part he says with a miraculous presence. And then we keep going. A shrill sound of laughter and of amused voices, voices of men, women, and children, resounded in the street while this wine game lasted. There was little roughness in the sport, and much playfulness. There was a special companionship in it, an observable inclination on the part of everyone to join some other one, which led, especially among the luckier or lighter-hearted, to frolicsome embraces, drinking of healths, shaking of hands, and even joining of hands and dancing, a dozen together. When the wine was gone, and the places where it had been most abundant were raked into gridiron patterns by fingers, these demonstrations ceased as suddenly as they had broken out. The man who had left his saw sticking in the firewood he was cutting set it in motion again. The woman who had left on a doorstep the little pot of hot ashes, at which she had been trying to soften the pain in her own starved fingers and toes, or in those of her child, returned to it. Men with bare arms, matted locks, and cadaverous faces, who had emerged into the winter light from cellars, moved away to descend again, and a gloom gathered on the scene that appeared more natural to it than the sunshine. Okay, so it continued with that festive kind of party atmosphere. I mean, they're drinking this disgusting wine, and they're cheering, and it's like a party, and they're throwing their arms around each other and toasting each other's health, which is all so sarcastic. And that little part, and the part you're about to see, it's foreshadowing the revolution. There's this thing, and I'm totally going to butcher it because it's a French word, and I don't speak French, but it's the Carmagnole, which is the dance of the revolution is what it's called. And it's kind of the big party, creepy atmosphere they had whenever they were gathering, rounding up the aristocracy and killing them. So yeah, this is actually a really creepy scene, or foreshadowing it anyway. And then after the little party atmosphere dies, the mood shifts. So it goes from party on the surface back to the gloom that's more natural to it than sun, right? And now it's going to take one more little shift to the super creepy. The wine was red wine, and had stained the ground of the narrow street in the suburb of Saint Anton in Paris, where it was spilled. It had stained many hands, too, and many faces, and many naked feet, and many wooden shoes. The hands of the man who sawed the wood left red marks on the billets, and the forehead of the woman who nursed her baby was stained with the stain of the old rag she wound about her head again. Those who had been greedy with the staves of the cask had acquired a tigerish smear about the mouth, and one tall joker so besmirched, his head more out of a long squalid bag of a nightcap than in it, scrawled upon a wall with his finger dipped in muddy wine lees, blood. The time was to come when that wine too would be spilled on the street stones, and when the stain of it would be read upon many there. So, screaming foreshadowing, right? The tall joker, his name is Gaspard, which you're about to find out. And he's a really minor character, but he does show up again. Like everything else, it's all interconnected. So don't forget this guy. He's a joker, right? And he picks up the remnants of that wine lees, which is it's like the sediment in a wine, so it sinks to the bottom. And obviously would have the tint and everything. He picks that up and uses it like paint and writes blood all across the wall. It's a little not so funny joke. It's like, haha, you're a creepy joke. And this is where you get that ominous, hey vocab word, ominous mood building, right? That blood and the imagery of the revolution coming in, all foreshadowing. And now that the clouds settled on St. Anton, which a momentary gleam had driven from his sacred countenance, the darkness of it was heavy. Cold, dirt, sickness, ignorance, and want were the lords in waiting on the saintly presence. Nobles of great power, all of them, but most especially the last. Samples of a people that had undergone a terrible grinding and regrinding in the mill, and certainly not in the fabulous mill which ground old people young. Shivered at every corner, passed in and out at every doorway, looked from every window, fluttered in every visage of a garment that the wind shook. The mill, which had worked them down, was the mill that grinds young people old. The children had ancient faces and grave voices, and upon them, and upon the grown faces, and plowed into every furrow of age and coming up afresh, was the sign: hunger, It was prevalent everywhere. Hunger was pushed out of the tall houses in the wretched clothing that hung upon poles and lines. Hunger was patched into them with straw and rag and wood and paper. Hunger was repeated in every fragment of the small modicum of firewood that the man sawed off. Hunger stared down from the smokeless chimneys and stared up from the filthy street that had no offal among its refuse of anything to eat. Hunger was the inscription on the baker's shelves, written in every small loaf of his scanty stock of bad bread, at the sausage shop in every dead dog preparation that was offered for sale. Hunger rattled its dry bones among the roasting chestnuts in the turned cylinder. Hunger was shred into every atomy of every farthing porringer of husky chips of potato, fried with some reluctant drops of oil. Okay, so pretty much take anything you can name and personify it, and that was the part we just read. Saint Anton is the neighborhood. It's a poor neighborhood in Paris, but what neighborhood wasn't then, right? So Saint Anton is personified. The whole neighborhood itself is. And then it talks about how cold, dirt, sickness, ignorance, and want were the lords in waiting on it. Okay, so even those things are personified. They're the lords. So you think the rulers, right? So the people of Saint Anton personified, is ruled by cold, dirt, sickness, ignorance, and most especially, right, the last of all, want. They want so much, and it's more than just food by this point. They want revenge, they want justice, they want something even more. They're hungry, all right, but hungry for a lot of different stuff, not just food. And then hunger itself, as in like the craving, food hunger, shows in everything. It shows in the clothes they hang out on the line because they're so sparse. It shows in the wood that they're chopping for firewood, because he's just chopping teeny tiny like splinters. And even in the chimneys, because there's no smoke coming from them. It's not like they even have the money to make a fire. It shows in the baker's shelves because the bread itself, just so you know, I think 50% of a person's diet back in 1770s and that time period, 50% came from bread. So the fact that they're not getting any bread and the bread they're getting is bad is a really important thing. The sausage isn't made with what we hope sausage would be made out of. It's made out of the dead dogs they could catch. The roasted chestnuts, you know, like the Christmas song, chestnuts roasting on an open fire. There are so few in there that it's just like a rattle. Okay, like when a penny gets caught in a dryer, because there's nothing in there, right? And then the hunger and the atomies of every farthing porringer. Okay, a farthing is about a quarter of a penny. So really, really cheap. And a porringer is like this, I don't know how to say it, like a bowl, but a really, really cheap bowl. So when you're saying a farthing porringer of husky chips and potatoes, that would be like a tiny, minuscule, barely there, cheap meal of potato, of fried potato. And they don't even have oil, right? There's a reluctant drop of oil in there. So hunger's everywhere. You can see it. It's so prevalent. Its abiding place was in all things fitted to it, a narrow winding street full of offense and stench, with other narrow and winding streets diverging, all peopled by rags and nightcaps, and all smelling of rags and nightcaps, and all visible things with a brooding look upon them that looked ill. So it's not just a stench of refuge, it's a stench of poverty too that's just prevalent everywhere, is basically what he's saying. In the hunted air of the people, there was yet some wild beast thought of the possibility of turning at bay. Depressed and slinking though they were, eyes of fire were not wanting among them, nor compressed lips, white with what they suppressed, nor foreheads knitted into the likeness of the gallows rope they mused about enduring or inflicting. The trade signs, and they were almost as many as the shops, were all grim illustrations of want. The butcher and the porkman painted up only the leanest scrags of meat, the baker the coarsest of meager loaves. The people rudely pictured as drinking in the wine shops, croaked over their scanty measures of thin wine and beer, and were glowering confidentially together. Nothing was represented in the flourishing condition, save tools and weapons. But the cutler's knives and axes were sharp and bright. The smith's hammers were heavy, and the gunmaker's stock was murderous. Okay, so this little part, okay, so you've got the hunger, you've got all of that showing everywhere. Oh, the wild beast turning at bay, which you should remember from The Most Dangerous Game, when Rainsford says, I'm still a beast at bay, right? So that, that hunted animal aspect. But if you notice, they're thinking about turning. Rebellion is mentioned in there. The depression, they're depressed and slinking, right? Kind of beaten down. But their eyes were afire. They had that anger in them, that fire. The lips were compressed. You know when you're so mad you just pinch your lips together and they start turning white because you know it's better to clench your lips than to actually say something? That's there. Their foreheads get knitted to like draw your eyebrows down really, really low and kind of wrinkle up your brow. They look like they're about to take a swing, right? And it has that image of enduring or inflicting a hangman's rope. So basically making an action that causes them to get hung or hanging someone themselves. And the signs that it talks about, those are the signs. Okay, sorry, I had to pause for a commercial break there for a second. Now I kind of forgot where I was. So, yes, the signs. Okay, well, at least I hope that's where I was. So there would be signs hanging out the places of business. Like, you know, we have signs outside our places of business right now, except the signs now usually say the place's name. But signs back then would be painted with a little picture because it's not like everybody could read, right? So the butcher would have a picture of, you know, like a pig or something getting slaughtered. The baker would obviously have, you know, like breads and pastries, but because everything is so wanting here, it's like the signs show the depression. They're painted with like meager little crumbs of bread and meager, like not much, right? But there's that sort of sinister aspect to them too. Like these people are very discontent. I mean, look at the picture hanging outside the wine shop. It's people drinking. Sure, I mean, that's what you would picture outside of a wine shop, but they're over just tiny, tiny little measures of thin, like watered down wine, and they're glowering, confidential together. It's like they're plotting something and staring at you with just like this awful kind of like suspicious look. And the only thing that seems prosperous are the weapon shops. I mean, the knives are sharp and ready to shank somebody. The hammers are really heavy and ready to pound someone down. The gunmaker is prepared to kill. Like, those signs seem really prosperous, which it's all just foreshadowing, right? Then it keeps going. It talks again about the really poorly built street, right? The crippling stones. The kennel, it's not like a dog kennel. That's not what we're talking about here. Sanitation was essentially non-existent in France until, like, I think the 1400s. I can't remember exactly. Either way, then they built kennels, which would be where the water would run, but it still wasn't fantastic. And then it's running down the street. They'll overflow right into the people's houses, so it's filthy. It's filthy. The thing about the lamplighter, he's going around and he lowers the candles on a pulley from the lamp and then lights them and then pulls them back up. And it's like the candles are swinging, kind of feebly casting a light, like they're lost at sea. To be at sea is to be bewildered, lost, confused. And then Dickens follows that up with the metaphor, like the candles are at sea and the ship and crew were in peril of a tempest, meaning the people were in danger of a storm. A tempest is a storm, right? And the storm image is carried throughout this entire book. Okay, there is a tempest, there's a storm. One of the chapters is even called like the coming of the storm or something like that. So watch out for that one because that's all revolution. The road image as well is repeated throughout, like right away from chapter 1, right? They're set about on their road. So there's nothing not connected. Again, really stressing that. For the time was to come when the gaunt scarecrows of that region should have watched the lamplighter in their idleness and hunger, so long as to conceive the idea of approving on his method, and hauling up men by those ropes and pulleys to flare upon the darkness of their condition. But the time was not come yet, and every wind that blew over France shook the rags of the scarecrows in vain, for the birds, fine of song and feather, took no warning, which is metaphorically the aristocracy, the upper class. So the gaunt scarecrows, those are the peasants. It talks about how they'll watch the lamplighter, and because they've been so idle, they've had nothing to do, and because they're so hungry, they come up with the idea of improving on his methods and hauling up people by the lamppost. In fact, the lamppost, there's a book written way back in that time period that talks about how they're completely ineffective for lighting lamps, like for casting light. Sorry, it says that the darkness casts more light than the actual the lamps do, just because of the way they're built. But they were actually not for this purpose, but they actually made really good places to hang people because they were so far away from the walls and the way the brackets turned. And so during the Revolution, they would string up people and hang them from it. But the birds, right, the fine feather and song, so that shows money, they took no warning. They basically didn't see this storm blowing towards them, shaking the scarecrows. They should have been afraid, but they were just ignoring it. They're blind. They're blind to the danger they're in. The wine shop was a corner shop, better than most others in its appearance and degree, and the master of the wine shop had stood outside it in a yellow waistcoat and green breeches, looking on at the struggle for the lost wine. "It's not my affair," he said, with a final shrug of the shoulders. "The people from the market did it. Let them bring another." And he's French, and so I should be saying that in at least an attempt of a French accent. But I'm not so good at that, so just, no, he's French, okay? And that whole thing about the yellow waistcoat and green breeches is a total tangent. I remember that for like the rest of my life, because whenever I was your age and in high school, that was a quiz question I missed because my teacher was like, well, what color were his clothes? And I'm like, ugh. So just know, at least I'm not that mean, right? There, his eyes happening to catch the tall joker writing up his joke, he called to him across the way. "Say then, my Gaspard, what do you do there?" The fellow pointed to his joke with immense significance, like, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, like, see my joke? As is often the way with his tribe. It missed its mark, and completely failed, as is often the way with his tribe, too. Okay, only a complete and utter idiot would write blood up on the wall. I mean, that's like saying, "Hi, I'm a revolutionary, and I'm going to be killing people later." And if you remember from chapter 1, to make any mention of a revolution coming was to be considered atheistical and traitorous. So here he is just advertising, like, "Hey, come get me," as if it's funny. And Defarge, the wine shop owner, walks over there and is like, "You're an idiot." And that's what's about to happen. "What now? Are you a subject for the mad hospital?" said the wine shop keeper, crossing the road and obliterating the jest with a handful of mud picked up for the purpose and smeared over it. "Why do you write in the public streets? Is there no other place to write such words in?" In his expostulation, he dropped his cleaner hand, perhaps accidentally, perhaps not, upon the joker's heart. The joker rapped it with his own, took a nimble spring upward, and came down in a fantastic dancing attitude with one of his stained shoes jerked off his foot into his hand and held it out. A joker of an extremely, not to say wolfishly, practical character he looked under those circumstances. So Defarge is like, "Are you a subject for the mad hospital?" Okay, not like a mentally ill hospital we have today. A mad hospital back then was essentially a prison, and awful. I mean, if you think the living conditions that were just described in St. Anton were bad, you have no idea. A mad hospital would be a million times worse. And Defarge picks up mud and he smears it over the wall so nobody can see. He's like, "Hey, there are better places to write that kind of thing." And that is so important, but I can't tell you why, because it would ruin a huge chunk of the book, but just know there is a better place to write such things. And Defarge places his hand, the clean hand, over Gaspard's heart. Kind of like solidarity and brotherhood, right? And then Gaspard does this little, like, bounce, pulls off his shoe like he's going to hit him, as in, yeah, I can fight. Put it on, said the other. So that's Defarge talking. Call wine, and finish there. With that advice, he wiped his soiled hand upon the Joker's dress, such as it was, quite deliberately, as having dirtied the hand on his account, and then recrossed the road and entered the wine shop. So he's like, stop with your foolishness, and he wipes the mud all over Gaspard, because he's like, hey, you're the reason I got dirty anyway, so you're now my washcloth. The wine shopkeeper was a bull-necked, martial-looking man of 30, and he should have been of a hot temperament, for, although it was a bitter day, he wore no coat, but carried one slung over his shoulder. His shirt sleeves were rolled up too, and his brown arms were bare to the elbows. Neither did he wear anything more on his head than his own crisply curling, short dark hair. He was a dark man altogether, with good eyes and a good bold breadth between them. Good-humoured looking on the whole, but implacable looking. Ooh, vocab word. Evidently a man of strong resolution and a set purpose. A man not desirable to be met, rushing down a narrow pass with a gulf on either side, for nothing would turn the man. That description of Defarge is kind of just polar opposite of Jerry Cruncher, too. I mean, even the whole eye thing, like Jerry's eyes are really close together as if they're afraid of being caught doing something sneaky and suspicious, whereas Defarge seems to be more of like an honorable man. His eyes, they have the good distance between them. He has a good humor look on the whole. He's very strong. It says he's a man of strong resolution and set purpose. But nothing can sway him. He's implacable. He's not a guy you would want to be on the opposite side of, right? Not desirable to be met rushing down a narrow gulf. He'll run you over. That kind of thing. He's not one to be opposed, is probably the best way of saying it. And then Madame Defarge. Oh, I love her so much. Okay. Madame Defarge, his wife, sat in the shop behind the counter as he came in. Madame Defarge was a stout woman of about his own age, so about 30, with a watchful eye that seldom seemed to look at anything, a large hand heavily ringed, a steady face, strong features, and great composure of manner. Okay, if you didn't catch, I know I'm stopping a lot, I'm so sorry, but when it says she has a watchful eye, that means she sees everything. There's nothing that escapes her notice. So, a watchful eye that seldom seemed to look anything. It's like when you're on your phone and your teacher's at the desk, and you're like, oh, they're not looking, so I can get on Facebook or whatever. And then all of a sudden, still not looking at you, are like, hey, put up your phone. Okay. That's her. She sees what you're doing. She knows. It's just you don't notice she's noticing. And she's so cool. Okay. There was a character about Madame Defarge from which one might have predicted that she did not often make mistakes against herself in any of the reckonings over which she presided. Madame Defarge, being sensitive to cold, was wrapped in fur, and had a quantity of bright shawl twined about her head, though not to the concealment of her large earrings. Her knitting was before her, but she had laid it down to pick her teeth with a toothpick. Thus engaged, with her right elbow supported by her left hand, Madame Defarge said nothing when her lord came in, but coughed, just one grain of cough. This, in combination with the lifting of her darkly defined eyebrows over her toothpick by the breadth of a line, suggested to her husband that he would do well to look round the shop among the customers for any new customer who had dropped in while he stepped over the way. Oh, okay, that's so subtle. She's in there. The whole thing about knitting, just as an FYI general life for you, if you ever see a character knitting, it's symbolic of the fates. Okay, it just is. The same way if you ever see a character whose initials are JC, it's a Jesus Christ reference. It just is. You already had a character whose initials are JC. I'm just saying. Okay, so yeah, she's got the whole knitting thing going down. The toothpick. Okay, she's just sitting here, her arm propped up on the other arm, picking her teeth. And when her husband walks in, she goes, raises her eyebrow just barely, And he gets, well, theoretically, he should get the message. It's suggested, right, that he should look around the shop. She's giving him a signal. No one looking in would know she was giving him a signal, but she's totally signaling him. The wine shopkeeper accordingly rolled his eyes about until they rested upon an elderly gentleman and a young lady who were seated in the corner. I wonder who that could be. Other company were there, 2 playing cards, 2 playing dominoes, 3 by the counter lengthening out a short supply of wine. As he passed behind the counter, he took notice that the elderly gentleman said in a look to the young lady, "This is our man." "What the devil do you do in that gallery there?" said Monsieur Defarge to himself. "I don't know you." But he feigned not to notice the 2 strangers, and fell into discourse with the triumvirate, sorry, I totally don't know how to say that word, of customers who were drinking at the counter. Okay, so clearly that's Laurie and Lucy. And Monsieur Defarge, he gets a little message from his wife. He looks around. He sees them. He's like, "What are y'all doing? I don't know you people." And he ignores them. And he goes up to talk to the 3, the triumvirative. That's a trio of 3 people. Wait, that's redundant. Whatever. "How goes it, Jacques?" said one of these 3 to Monsieur Defarge. "Is all the spilt wine swallowed?" "Every drop, Jacques," answered Monsieur Defarge. When this interchange of Christian names was effected, Madame Defarge, picking her teeth with her toothpick, coughed another grain of cough and raised her eyebrows by the breadth of another line. So basically like, "Hey, look over there. Again, you didn't get the message the first time." "It is not often," said the second of the 3, addressing Monsieur Defarge, "that many of these miserable beasts know the taste of wine, or of anything but black bread and death. Is that not so, Jacques?" "It is so, Jacques," Monsieur Defarge returned. At this second interchange of the Christian name, Madame Defarge, still using her toothpick with profound composure, coughed another grain of cough and raised her eyebrows by the breadth of another line. So basically, every time he keeps ignoring her, she gets a little more frustrated, but doesn't show, right? Because she's totally composed. And she's like, eyebrow raise, eyebrow raise, eyebrow raise again, only much more subtle than that. And if you haven't caught the weird thing, their name is Jacques. I mean, we would say it Jack, like that would be the English version. So he's like, "How you doing, Jack?" "No, I'm fine, Jack. How are you, Jack?" Please note that Jack is a really common name, and that Monsieur Defarge's first name is Ernest. So why in the world would 4 guys all be named Jack talking to each other? Like, "Hey, Jack, how you doing?" "I'm great, Jack. How are you?" "Perfect, Jack." And then start talking about poverty and how the people are used to death. What could it be? Who could those people be? Okay, I'm just going to spoil it for you. They're revolutionaries. The revolutionaries, the Jacquerie. Jacquerie used to be the general term just for the French peasantry. But during the Revolution, the Jacquerie became the name of the individuals who participated in the peasant rebellion. So if you see someone named Jacques, they're a revolutionary. And as a little FYI, because I love to give you fun facts, the Jacquerie, in reality, got formed in Beauvais. Do you remember what characters from Beauvais? Dr. Manet. I sound like Dr. Seuss because I'm rhyming everything. The last of the 3 now said his say as he put down his empty drinking vessel and smacked his lips. "Ah, so much the worse. A bitter taste it is that such poor cattle always have in their mouths. And hard lives they live, Jacques. Am I right, Jacques?" "You are right, Jacques," was the response of Monsieur Defarge. This third interchange of Christian name was completed at the moment when Madame Defarge put her toothpick by, kept her eyebrows up, and slightly rustled in her seat. Okay, she got so frustrated that she puts her toothpick down. Oh, look out! "Hold then. True," muttered her husband. "Gentlemen, my wife." The three customers pulled off their hats to Madame Defarge with 3 flourishes. She acknowledged their homage by bending her head and giving them a quick look. Then she glanced in a casual manner round the wine shop, took up her knitting with great apparent calmness and repose of spirit, and became absorbed in it. Okay, that's essential. Okay, her doing that is essentially like me jumping up and screaming, "Look around the room!" Okay, it's the equivalent. "Gentlemen," said her husband, who had kept his bright eye observantly upon her, "good day. The chamber, furnished bachelor fashion, that you wished to see and were inquiring for when I stepped out, is on the 5th floor. The doorway to the staircase gives on the little courtyard close to the left here," pointing with his hand, "near the window of my establishment. But now that I remember, one of you has already been there and can show the way. Gentlemen, adieu." They paid for their wine and left the place. The eyes of Monsieur Defarge were studying his wife at her knitting, when the elderly gentleman advanced from his corner and begged the favour of a word. "Willingly, sir," said Monsieur Defarge, and quietly stepped with him to the door. Their conference was very short, but very decided. Almost at the first word, Monsieur Defarge started and became deeply attentive. Okay, so now he gets it. When he walked in and Madame Defarge was doing the whole look around the room, he saw Laurie and Lucy, and he's like, "I don't know these people, why should I care?" And even after the Jacques leave, he stares at them like, "I don't get it." And it's not until Laurie comes up and says, "We're here about Dr. Manette," that Defarge is like, "Oh," and he gets really startled. He's like, "Okay, got it." And then he starts paying attention, and everything gets really serious now. It had not lasted a minute when he nodded and went out. The gentleman then beckoned to the young lady, and they too went out. Madame Defarge knitted with nimble fingers and steady eyebrows, and saw nothing. Oh, that's so not true! Never believe the narrator when he's like, she saw nothing. She sees everything! She's like this wonderful, evil, sinister puppet master, and I love her. Mr. Jarvis Lorry and Miss Manette, emerging from the wine shop thus, joined Monsieur Defarge in the doorway to which he had directed his other company just before. It opened from a stinking little black courtyard, and was the general public entrance to a great pile of houses, inhabited by a great number of people. In the gloomy tile-paved entry to the gloomy tile-paved staircase, Monsieur Defarge bent down on one knee to the child of his old master, and put her hand to his lips. It was a gentle action, but not at all gently done, and very remarkable transformation had come over him in a few seconds. He had no good humour in his face, nor any openness of aspect left, but had become a secret, angry, dangerous man. So, Defarge, he kind of changes in his appearance. He kisses her hand, that's a very courtly, gentlemanly gesture, and normally it'd be gently done, like, "Oh, so delicate," right? But he's so angry that there's a little roughness to it. And he's not angry at her. He's angry on behalf of her, and more appropriately, angry on behalf of Dr. Manette, who he's protecting right now. Okay? But he becomes a secret, angry, dangerous man. That's the man who's the revolutionary. All of that other stuff you saw, that's just a front. It is very high. It is a little difficult. Better to begin slowly. Thus Monsieur Defarge, in a stern voice to Mr. Lorry, as they began ascending the stairs. "Is he alone?" The latter whispered, so Mr. Lorry whispers. "Alone? God help him, who should be with him?" said the other in the same low voice. "Is he always alone, then?" "Yes." "Of his own desire?" "Of his own necessity. As he was when I first saw him after they found me and demanded to know if I would take him, and, at my peril, be discreet. As he was then, so he is now." So Laurie and Defarge are having this conversation back and forth, and they're saying it really quiet, so Lucy can't really hear it. She's not listening to them. So Manette is alone. Laurie goes, "Is he always alone?" And Defarge is like, "Yeah." And Laurie doesn't get it yet. Laurie's like, "Well, is it because he wants to be alone?" And Defarge is like, "He has to be alone. It's necessary he be alone. He's the same here as he was when I found him." And Laurie goes, He is greatly changed? Changed? That's Defarge's comment. When you see Defarge kind of do that little one word with the exclamation point after Laurie says something, it's basically his way of saying Laurie asked a stupid question. Like, changed? Yeah, it's more than changed. Yeah, change is like mild for what he is. The keeper of the wine shop stopped to strike the wall with his hand and mutter a tremendous curse. No direct answer could have been half so forceful. Mr. Laurie's spirits grew heavier and heavier as he and his two companions ascended higher and higher. So Laurie's like, he's changed, and Defarge is like, changed. He's so upset at how changed Dr. Manet is. He turns and he punches the wall and cusses. And that one gesture, like, Laurie starts getting it, and his spirits get heavier and heavier. Like, he doesn't know if he's going to be able to recall Manet to life like he's hoping. Such a staircase with its accessories in the older and more crowded parts of Paris would have been bad enough now. But at that time, it was vile indeed to unaccustomed and unhardened senses. Every little habitation within the great foul nest of one high building, that is to say, the room or rooms within every door that opened on the general staircase, left its own heap of refuse on the landing, beside flinging other refuse from its own windows. The uncontrollable and hopeless mass of decomposition so engendered would have polluted the air, even if poverty and deprivation had not loaded it with their own intangible impurities. The two bad sources combined made it almost insupportable. So people back in the day just threw their trash out the window and let it run in the street. I can't remember there's a word for it, but they do that, and they just pile it on the stair. And so, like, that alone would have been enough to make this place unbearable and disgusting and stinky and filthy and dirty, and just, like, you wouldn't want to be there. But he says that mixed with the poverty of it, so poverty and deprivation, just made it so much worse. Through such an atmosphere by a steep dark shaft of dirt and poison the way lay. Yielding to his own disturbance of mind, and to his young companion's agitation, which became greater every instant, Mr. Jarvis Lorry stopped twice to rest. Each of these stoppages was made at a doleful grating, by which any languishing good airs that were left uncorrupted seemed to escape, and all spoilt and sickly vapors seemed to crawl in. Through the rusted bars, tastes rather than glimpses were caught of the jumbled neighborhood, and nothing within range, nearer or lower than the summits of the two great towers of Notre Dame, had any promise on it of the healthy life or wholesome aspirations. So Laurie is a little agitated. Lucy, she passed out nearly whenever he told her what happened, and so she's getting agitated, and he gets worried, so he stops twice. We need a little breath. We need a little breather. The breather involves, like, sucking in all that foul air, so it's not much help. At last, the top of the staircase was gained, and they stopped for the third time. There was yet an upper staircase of a steeper inclination and of contracted dimensions to be ascended before the garret story was reached. The keeper of the wine shop, always going a little in advance, and always going on the side which Mr. Lorry took, as though he dreaded to be asked any questions by the young lady, turned himself about here, and carefully, feeling in the pockets of the coat he carried over his shoulder, took out a key. So Defarge doesn't want to have to answer any of Lucy's questions. You know when something really, really bad happens that you know about, but your friend doesn't, and you just dread having to tell them? That's kind of his situation. So he's staying ahead so that there's no way she can ask him a question. If she doesn't ask a question, he doesn't have to answer it. Then he pulls out a key. "The door is locked, then, my friend?" said Mr. Lorry, surprised. "Ah, yes," was the grim reply of Monsieur Defarge. "You think it necessary to keep the unfortunate gentleman so retired?" "I think it necessary to turn the key." Monsieur Defarge whispered it closer in his ear, and frowned heavily. "Why?" "Why? Because he has lived so long locked up that he would be frightened, rave, tear himself to pieces, die, come to I know not what harm, if his door was left open." Is it possible? Exclaimed Mr. Lorry. Is it possible? Repeated Defarge bitterly. Yes. And a beautiful world we live in when it is possible, and when many other such things are possible, and not only possible but done. Done, see you, under that sky there every day. Long live the devil. Let us go on. So Defarge pulls out a key because Manet is locked in his room. And Laurie's like, you lock him in like a prisoner? It's like, you think it necessary to keep him locked in? And Defarge is like, no. It's necessary to turn the key. This guy's been imprisoned so long, he needs that, or he'd go mad. He'd hurt himself. If the door was left open. And Mr. Lorry, he can't believe it. He's like, is that possible? Is that even possible for someone to have been in prison so long that they can't handle being free? And Defarge is bitter. He's like, yeah, in this great, beautiful, shining world, bad things happen. It's possible. Even worse things happen under this bright, beautiful sky. Long live the devil. Let's go on. This dialogue had been held in so very low a whisper that not a word of it had reached the young lady's ears. But by this time she trembled under such strong emotion, and her face expressed such deep anxiety, and, above all, such dread and terror, that Mr. Lorry felt it incumbent on him to speak a word or two of reassurance. Courage, dear miss, courage. Business. The worst will be over in a moment. It's but passing the room door, and the worst is over. Then all the good you bring to him, all the relief, all the happiness you bring to him, begin. Let our good friend here assist you on that side. That's well, friend Defarge. Come now. Business. Business. Please remember, every time Lorry starts harping on business, it's because he's emotionally overwrought. He is not calm right now. He's not unaffected. He's not like, this is business. We must go on. You can help your dad in a minute. No. He's almost in tears. Like, come on, business. Keep yourself together. Like, almost telling himself to keep it together, too, right? They went up slowly and softly. The staircase was short, and they were soon at the top. There, as it had an abrupt turn in it, they came all at once in sight of 3 men, whose heads were bent down close together at the side of the door, and who were intently looking into the room to which the door belonged, through some chinks or holes in the wall. On hearing footsteps close at hand, these 3 turned, and rose, and showed themselves to be the 3 of one name, who had been drinking in the wine shop. So the 3 Jacques who went to go look at that room for rent, that's them, there, staring at Manet. Just try to imagine a reason why Defarge would send 3 other people to go look at Manet. What good could be gained from that? And I forgot them in the surprise of your visit, exclaimed Monsieur Defarge. Leave us, good boys, we have business here. The 3 glided by and went silently down. There, appearing to be no other door on that floor, and the keeper of the wine shop going straight to this one when they were left alone, Mr. Lorry asked him in a whisper, with a little anger, Do you make a show of Monsieur Manet? I show him, in the way you have seen, to a chosen few. Is that well? I think it is well. Who are the few? How do you choose them? I choose them as real men of my name. Jacques is my name, to whom the sight is likely to do good. Enough. You are English. That is another thing. Stay there, if you please, a little moment. So the Jacques are there, perhaps as motivation, encouragement, to be used as a symbol, maybe, of the revolution. Like, here's this man who's suffered injustice. Make him your motivation to fight if you need it. But Lorry doesn't get it. Defarge is like, he's like, do you think that's fair? Do you think that's good? He's mad. He's mad about it. He's like, you're making a spectacle of him? You're showing him off like an animal in a zoo? And Defarge is like, I do what I think is best. I show him to my people, to my revolutionaries. You're English, you don't get it. And then he, moves on. With an admonitory gesture to keep them back, he stooped and looked in through the crevice in the wall. Soon raising his head again, he struck twice or thrice upon the door, evidently with no other object than to make a noise there. With the same intention, he drew the key across it 3 or 4 times before he put it clumsily into the lock and turned it as heavily as he could. So he's making as much noise as possible to not scare Dr. Manet, right? The same way a jailer in a jail, he's not going to care about being quiet. He's going to be clumping along. The keys are jangling. He's going to bang on the door. I mean, there's not going to be any quiet. It's going to be noisy. so he tries to keep it the same, to keep Dr. Manet from getting frightened. The door slowly opened inward under his hand, and he looked into the room and said something. A faint voice answered something. Little more than a single syllable could have been spoken on either side. He looked back over his shoulder and beckoned them to enter. Mr. Lorry got his arm securely around the daughter's waist and held her, for he felt she was sinking. Okay, so she's fainting. Again. Business, he urged with a moisture that was not of business shining on his cheek. Come in. He's crying. Lorry's crying. He's so moved. I'm afraid of it, she answered, shuddering. Of it? What? I mean of him, of my father. Rendered in a manner desperate by her state and by the beckoning of their conductor, he, Lorry, drew over his neck the arm that shook upon his shoulder, lifted her a little, and hurried her into the room. He set her down just within the door and held her, clinging to him. So she's so terrified of what she's going to see that she's about to faint again. So Lorry just puts that shaking arm around her shoulder and carries her, as much as a 60-year-old man can carry her, into the room and just sets her down. And she's just clinging to him, hugging him. And he's hugging her right back like they're so emotionally distraught. Defarge drew out the key, closed the door, locked it on the inside, took out the key again, and held it in his hand. All this he did methodically, and with as loud and harsh an accompaniment of noise as he could make. Finally, he walked across the room with a measured tread to where the window was. He stopped there and faced around. The garret, built to be a depository for firewood, and the like, was dim and dark, for the window of the dormer shape was in truth a door in the roof, with a little crane over it for the hoisting up of stores from the street, unglazed, and closing up the middle in two pieces like any other door of French construction. To exclude the cold, one half of this door was fast closed, and the other was opened but a very little way. Such a scanty portion of light was admitted through these means that it was difficult, on first coming in, to see anything, and long habit alone could have slowly formed in anyone the ability to do any work required nicety in such obscurity. Yet work of that kind was being done in the garret, for, with his back towards the door, and his face towards the window where the keeper of the wine shop stood looking at him, a white-haired man sat on a low bench, stooping forward, and very busy, making shoes. Okay, so that's Dr. Manet. Obviously, your first look, you just see his back, and the white hair, and he's making shoes. They're in a room, like a garret, way up top, that was originally meant for firewood, like for storing firewood. So it's definitely not meant to be a prison. And there's almost no light. When it talks about an unglazed window, that means there is no glass. They just have like those wooden shutters. So, I mean, there's no light getting into this place. You wouldn't think anyone would be able to make shoes. But he is, because he's so used to working in dark, awful, lonesome conditions anyway. There's just this little shoemaker making shoes. And that is the end of chapter 5. And I know it took a really long time, but there's so much history and illusion stuff going on that you needed it. Oh, the knitting thing. I can't believe I almost forgot this. Madame Defarge knits. Knitting, right? So the whole fate reference. But also, historically, there were people called the knitting citizens it was a group of women, and they were famous for bringing their knitting to the public executions of the aristocracy. And they'd just be sitting up there in front of the guillotine like, woohoo, I'm making my knitting. How awesome. So there's that. We already talked about the jockery. Okay, good enough. Oh, no, the shoemaking thing. Dr. Manet, being a shoemaker, that's actually based on Dickens' own observation of prisoners in Philadelphia. There was actually one who passed the time making shoes, and so he took that real-life thing and worked into Dr. Manet. Okay, now we're done with chapter 5. Yay!